Colleagues, and welcome to the next episode of DINCast, where today we're going to be looking at the COVID crisis through the eyes of an entrepreneur. And today I'm delighted to be joined by Simon Devonshire. Simon is a distinguished visitor at the National Physical Laboratory and formerly the government's entrepreneur in residence. He's a very successful businessman in his own right and is involved with numerous startups and has a lot to say about the world of business and innovation. And this session is a little bit different in terms of we have a chat about a range of issues to do with where the world is at this moment in time. And Simon shares with us his views for where the opportunities and where some of the risks are for leaders in the post-COVID world. So I started off by asking Simon what his view is of the crisis through his lens as an entrepreneur.
Entrepreneurs are brilliant at identifying what I call friction, and the shitness of that experience is exactly that. And you're absolutely right that in a post-COVID world, conferences are not going to go away. The need of networking and the thirst for learning, in fact, the thirst for learning is multiplying exponentially because we live in an era that is more uncertain than anything that's ever gone before. So not only have we not experienced the pandemic before, we've not experienced anything of the order of magnitude that we're experiencing now. It's not just that it's unprecedented, it's also that it is profoundly unpredictable. And it's the combination of unprecedented and unpredictable that means that now is the time of greatest uncertainty, I would argue, probably in the history of humanity. And so what is the void? The void is people are hungry and keen to explore what the new future might be. There's a lot of talk about the new normal, and they are wanting anything that can give them an informed view of what that might be and what that might look like. And there are a couple of notable industries that I think have really let us down, and one of those I would cite as journalism. So I think that journalism has been especially unhelpful in this period. And I read with great interest a tweet from Lord Sugar earlier, who was basically sort of trying to petition some of the most notable journalists to be less aggressive in their journalism, which he cited as not representing the UK nation's sort of mood and sentiment right now. And that isn't the bit that's interesting. What's interesting is when you click on that tweet, you're then able to see people who've chosen to respond to that. So these are people who have not got any obligation or any mandate to reply. They've invested of their own free will to comment on Lord Sugar's tweet. And you should read the vile nature of what humanity is spitting back in response to that. It is unbelievable, and I can see the hostility, complaint, and sheer nastiness of all of that rhetoric. I can see that there is a genuine difference of opinion, that some people are really appreciative of what the journalists are doing, but in that, what's missing is the kind of investigative journalism that we're seeing, where you just get journalist after journalist chest poking a minister on, for instance, personal protection equipment, just constantly, is missing any insight into what other countries are doing, how much have we actually got, what the issues and frictions are in the supply chain, what are UK manufacturers doing, how much more do we need, how much more manufacturing capacity do we need to generate. All of the other stuff around this is just missing, because all they keep doing is poking really aggressively the one individual sat in front of the camera. And I just think that we are so ill-informed as a result of that. So I think that anything in the future that helps people to fathom just why are these things really difficult, because evidently they are really difficult, right? And what can we each do? and how can we contribute to that? And where might our businesses fill some of those gaps, and what the commercial opportunities therefore might be, and what our businesses need to adapt to, and how that might be.
Just moving on a little bit to sort of business models then, in terms of, has what's happened changed your perceptions or assumptions about the kind of business models that we operate in? I'm particularly thinking of things like, the just-in-time sort of lean model and things like that, because clearly that's shown up some big deficiencies here in this rush to efficiency. And actually what's being needed is some capacity.
Yeah, so my thoughts on this are probably highly controversial and not yet fully formed. So, if you'd asked me as recently as 2 months ago, or at the time of the general election in the UK, for instance, I would have had very strong opinions that were anti-nationalisation, based on my childhood experience and the winter of discontent in the early 70s, and when life was frankly really quite shit. We literally couldn't keep the lights on, and most people I speak to have no collective memory of that, but it was dreadful. It was shockingly dreadful. Um, Essentially, the global economy and the UK economy have just caught a cold, literally, and there will be an enormous cost of that. And so right now, things like the inequality in executive pay versus national average pay feel inequitable. They feel horribly inequitable. Billionaires publicly complaining that they can't afford to meet payroll and furloughing their staff. What is the point of being a billionaire? Surely the point of being a billionaire is exactly moments like this, isn't it? And it's not about the conservation of your personal wealth when you already have more than you could ever possibly liberate in a lifetime. That what role right now shareholder value yielded in dividend? We what middle class affluence right now is hungry for dividend, and why? The notion of yielding dividend. Equally, I hear a lot of talk about universal basic income, and I'm fundamentally opposed to that. I hear about the printing and distribution of free money, and I'm deeply worried about it. But what I do feel is that we need to get rid of brown envelopes. We need to eliminate the bills rather than distributing cash. Everybody needs water, everybody needs gas, everybody needs electric, everybody needs broadband at a time like this. Why not literally write to the providers of those services and let the government pick up the bill for the next 3 months or so? At what point should we really now think about nationalising that infrastructure? Because not only do we have woeful connectivity outside of our major conurbations, but even within the conurbations, we need not just a little bit more resilience, we need to at least treble the capacity. I kind of feel that we don't need to just exponentially tweak these things. We need to fundamentally overhaul them, and we need to massively increase the investment in them. And we have clearly been investing over the years billions in national defence and security, and I'm not opposed to that. What I'm saying is perhaps we've been investing in the wrong type of defence and the wrong security against the wrong threat. And that actually COVID has proven to be a far more vicious and effective enemy. And I don't think it ends there. I can see others. I mean, I've had friends, colleagues and associates within my ecosystem worry about the next sort of viral contagion being in cloud computing, not in humanity, and that we are so dependent on it, what would happen. Actually, I am fearful of that, but my greater fear is supply chain management. We didn't even stock out, and we were panic buying loo roll. I've had friends tell me that men our age in New York, apparently, I've no evidence of this, but it's a good anecdote, apparently they've been panic buying handguns. I think that we would only need our local Tesco to stock out for 3 days, and there would literally be anarchy. So it just sort of makes me think that there is a lot of work to be done.
Your background is heavily in the sort of the tech sector, and obviously technology has played a role in helping us sort of navigate these times as well. Are you feeling more positive now that actually there are some tech solutions that, you know, when you think about it, you know, some organizations have done more in sort of 3 weeks than probably what they would have done in 3 years
Yeah.
through the enablement of technology? So are you feeling quite positive that actually in the post-COVID world, technology can genuinely help organizations and businesses move forward?
Absolutely. So there's a lot of skepticism and negativity about it, but the reality is, in a post-COVID world, our ability to navigate lockdown and the need of social distancing, isolation, and control of the contagion will fundamentally be technology dependent, you know, to some extent. And I think with that comes a whole host of things that we now need to consider. I mean, I hear constantly concerns, anxieties, and resistance to technology on the grounds of civil liberty, and I don't share those views. I think I'm not saying that those concerns aren't legitimate. I think, you know, they're absolutely legitimate to those that hold them. But if we want liberty, we are going to have to compromise some aspects of that, in the same way that if you want to prevent crime, we have CCTV, whether you like it or not. You know, if you want to have more liberty, you're going to have to agree to, or the majority of us are going to have to agree to, using contact track and trace apps to manage the contagion and to respond to them. So if you get an alert saying that you've come in close proximity, you will need to isolate yourself in a way that's uncompromising. And I think that technology is going to be fundamental to that, as will the greater need of identifying, validating your identity, as will the need of not only authenticating that Simon Devonshire is Simon Devonshire, but also what my immunity status is.
Right.
So these are things that I think, you know, if we want to have liberty, we need to kind of get on board. I think that technology will play, particularly in social housing. So if I let's just look at the sector in which you're expert, you know, name me a big brand company that's famous for deep cleaning, because I can't name one. I literally can't name one. But you know, it is quite evident that if you've got hundreds of millions of pounds worth of physical building infrastructure, you are going to need to be able to not only clean it, but evidence that you've done so. You're going to need to be able to think about the repurposing of redundant buildings. So we have so much commercial real estate that now is utterly redundant. COVID has done to commercial real estate what contactless payments have done for cash. You know, why would you use cash that could give you a contagion when you can use contactless, right? There's pretty much only one reason: it's tax avoidance, realistically. You know, why would you bother spending hundreds of thousands of pounds on an office in which you can barely operate? We need better technology to regulate and manage air pressure within buildings. So air pressure will be fundamental to the management of air pressure will be fundamental to the management of air flow. That will be fundamental to the management of contagions within the air. So anybody that is able to physically control airflow within buildings their business will be worth a fortune. And one of my biggest concerns is inadvertent homelessness. So everybody everybody that's in the comfort of established residence sort of assumes that homelessness is somehow sort of self-inflicted as a result of, you know, any number of issues, you know, including addiction as an example. But I am quite sure that there are a whole host of people who are going to find themselves homeless by sheer misfortune of being in the wrong place at the wrong time, with businesses that are collapsed around their ears and unable to stop, you know, events from unfolding in front of their very eyes. And so there's going to be a ton of stuff.
Just on that point then, because I mean, obviously you're a serial investor and supporter of startups, and one of the things we've worked on is, how do you help startups get to market, get to exposure, get to test live situations for some of their products and services and that. So, people are going to be looking around for different ways of doing things, and so is this a good time to be working in an agile startup where you've got something new to bring to the future of work or the post-COVID world? Or actually, is it going to be challenging because you're simply not going to be able to attract the finance or investment?
I think the investment will eventually return, but it may take a while to do so. I think that, if the question is now a good time to create a startup, the answer is probably no. However, the truth is, I know 3 very accomplished entrepreneurs who are now using this time as an opportunity to really think through what the next venture is going to be. So they're really actively doing all the hard yards of really crunching down, what is this entity, what's the business, what's the model, what's the purpose, what's the problem, and the look and feel of how they're going to deliver their minimum viable product. So that business doesn't stop just because the circumstances are hard. The advantage of creating a venture at this time is if you can make it work in this environment, you can make it work in any environment. So I think there's a lot to that. I think with regard to corporates, innovation just got different. So if you've got an early stage venture, I've always advocated B2B to C as a route to market. So it's very hard for you as an early stage venture to crack your pathway to market. Going via a corporate is often the best way. So really looking out for those corporate accelerator programs and corporate investment, corporate support, I think is fundamental. But for the corporates, I just, another industry that I think is at risk of letting us down is probably travel and tourism, because I think we've never been in more need of things to look forward to. But when I've tried to book holidays long term before, it hasn't been possible because the industry is not yet able to secure availability of accommodation or flights, more than 12 months in advance. And that's despite the fact that some of those industry players have been doing this a very, very long time. So my request is, as an example, for businesses to think the unthinkable. So I know of a doctor's GP surgery that wrestled with digital for 7 years with no progress whatsoever, and then transitioned to 100% digital in 3 days. Right? So I get that these things are difficult. I understand that. But I think that a lot of businesses have been really shown up badly. The same is true in education.
Leaders have still got business to run. They've still got people and their customers and their colleagues within the organisations to sort of look after. So, is there anything you can sort of share in terms of, look, they're going to have to reboot? I'm calling it sort of rebooting their organisation, looking at the things they want to keep, dropping things that don't really sort of add value. How would you approach this as a businessman and investor? If you were looking to reboot a business that still had a really, really good customer base, compared to other sectors, still had a really good income stream and things like that, surely its time has now come. But how would you advise leaders to start thinking about it in this early stage?
So I always start with what's the problem we're here to solve. So I would just really drill down on that and just really take great care that post-COVID is the problem that you originally set your business still relevant, appropriate, and the most powerful course of action for you to take. So I start with the problem, then having really defined very specifically, and that may require some fundamental adjustment. So in one of my ventures, they have completely pivoted, massively pivoted, as a result of looking at that problem. And now they've applied their technology specifically to COVID-related issues rather than, it's a life sciences company, rather than diabetes, which was the cause that it was previously looking at. And it will get back to diabetes, it's just changed its order of priority. The second thing that I would encourage people to do is really focus in on, once you've got your problem, defined, is how are you going to provide a solution that is better but not best? Best is just Rolls Royce. Best is frankly expensive. Best isn't the challenge. The challenge is better. How and why is your solution better than the alternatives, and why would somebody choose yours rather than the other options, which may include doing nothing? And you know, that would be my kind of principle. And the third one is, I've always been absolutely fanatically passionate about people and human welfare, particularly in the course of the management of my businesses. I think it's really easy to be very successful in business just simply by being a bastard. But there has never been more need of care than right now.
We're sort of drawing to a close now, Simon. I mean, that's been a sort of fascinating sort of dive through a whole range of issues around sort of the crisis. And I know you're still formulating a lot of your thinking around this as it evolves and that. But I think is the one sort of message or one piece of advice that you would want to sort of leave my viewers and my members with that can perhaps sort of give them some element of sort of positivity around, you know, what the future might look like?
Yeah. So the first thing to say is it is inevitable that this period will come to an end. The inconvenient truth is that we just don't know, you know, with any certainty how best to predict that. But it will. It will resolve itself, and you know, some new form of normality will resume. I think that I'm hoping that we will emerge into a world that is far more compassionate, both for fellow humans, animals, the environment, and the planet, and that we take far greater care. Who we choose to be with, I think, is going to become exponentially important and much more greatly valued. I hope that we'll become a much more productive society that better uses and exploits technology for its advantage, and uses technology intelligently to better safeguard and protect itself against, you know, things like this pandemic. So yeah, I feel hugely positive, and you know, at any time there are always business opportunities that come from this. Just, you know, stay open-minded to them, and look for those opportunities and respond to them. That would be my thoughts.
Okay, and Sam. Well, thank you so much for your time. I always enjoy sort of chatting to you and sort of getting your big world view on these things. So thank you very much, sir.